I'm delighted to welcome our guest of honor, Ms. Peggy Delaney and Mrs. Kumari Shibulal for this chat. Thank you both very much for being here today. I'm sure it's going to be a wonderful, thought-provoking discussion, so let's get started. Peggy, I'd like to start with you if you don't mind. Let's go back to the beginning. If you can talk about how you began your philanthropic journey. Some of the early years, what were some of the challenges you faced? What obstacles did you overcome? You can just give us a sense of what that was like.
All right, and I could say a lot, so cut me off if I get too talkative. The first thing I can remember is in high school, being part of an exchange program. I was with a private school, and one of my teachers was connected to a public school in Harlem and took a group of us to visit students there. We spent after school the day together, became friends, and it really made me realize the distinction between those going to an elite private school and those going to a public school, albeit for very talented students. But at the same time, as young people, it was just so easy to interact once we had the opportunity. So that was the first thing. And then after graduating from high school, I spent this time living in a squatter settlement or favela in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, where I was incredibly impressed by the will of people to get out of poverty, but the lack of connection to education, opportunities, policies, etc. And that left me with the feeling that really what was needed was not the poor making their best effort, but other sectors of society connecting. And I would say that the third type of realization, because I come from the Rockefeller family, which obviously is extremely privileged, but I needed as a young person to establish my own identity, and so I tried to avoid the family connection. And then I realized at a certain point that probably the biggest contribution I could make was to use the access I had to other people of influence and means to bring them into becoming socially responsible and involved with their whole selves, not only their money.
Fantastic, thank you. And Mrs. Kumari, if you could just give us some insight into what the early years were like for you.
Actually, me and Shibu came from middle class families. And actually, I was from a lower middle class family. My parents were not educated, and it is very little means. But they knew the importance of education, and they want us to study. And that we believe that is the reason where we are today, because of the education that they insisted on us. We have been in the US for many years, and in 1996 we came back to India, and then we thought we will do something in social sector, and we choose education because that can transform a person's life a lot. And we were thinking about that, and in 1999, in a very humble way, we started giving scholarship to 2 children who studied in the school where Shibu studied. And over the years, it became, the next year it was 4, 6, 10, like that it has increased. And now we are giving 3,500 children scholarship. And we have other scholarship programs also, education programs, not scholarship program, like Shiksha Lokam, Edumentum, and we have Vidya Rakshak and things like that. But we never thought we will reach at this level, because we never thought of reaching this level. We thought of having it in a small scale.
Great. And just to pick up on that, you mentioned that you wanted to start a program that would transform lives through education. So would you say that is your philosophy towards giving? And what was sort of the inspiration for some of the other programs you mentioned? Like, for example, Ankur or the Samhita Academy?
Actually, we have been in Vidyadhan for many years, and we realized that some of the children will not reach at that stage. Vidyadhan scholarship starts there after 10th grade, and some of the children will drop out before they reach 10th grade because of the family reasons and things like that. Then we thought we will take these children and house them with a house mother and send them to good private schools to learn, to study them. And then we were doing that. We had 3 homes with 10 children each and a house mother and caretakers, and we were sending them to private schools. But we thought the schools will embrace them, but it did not happen. They were kind of discriminating them, like because their background is that is why they are doing that. They are just like any other 3-year or 4-year-old, so they are kind of naughty and all that, but they don't want to accept that. It was really saddening to us. So I told Shibu that we will start our own school, so there won't be any problem. We will sensitize our teachers, and we will have that. And so that is how we started Samhita Academy, and along with that the hostel Ankur. And now the first set of 2 children, they are going to college this year. One is doing BCom and the other one is doing his engineering now. And we are so proud that so they are doing so well. Without that, so they would have been somewhere else working in the slums or working in one of the places. But now we have about 160 students in the hostel, in the Angur hostel. They are going to school along with the Samhita Academy students. They are like privileged students, and these children are underprivileged children.
Fantastic, thank you. Coming to you, Peggy, what would you say is sort of the philosophy for you behind some of the work that you're doing? What are you seeing in terms of other givers? What is their philosophy or motivation for giving back?
So going back to the experience in Brazil, the extreme polarization both between rich and poor and increasingly ideologically or religiously in the world is a huge problem that I think prevents the resolution of any kind of complex problem. So where we've come after 34 years with Synergos is that what is a missing link are people who have both the self-confidence and the empathy and the ability to listen, to reach out across divides, to bring people together around whatever the problem is. So we're agnostic on the particular problem, but we focus on what we call bridging leadership, a style of leadership which empowers people at any level of society. Because if you think of society as a tapestry, at every weave in this tapestry, there's a need to reconcile differences and get people to work together. So our goal and our mission and our belief and our hope that other people will want to join us is to help build this capacity for people to bridge divides, to solve exactly the kinds of problems, such as education, that afflict many societies.
Fantastic, thank you. And you talked a bit about bridging leadership. So could you tell us, perhaps, and I know we spoke about this a little earlier, some of the case studies that you found that have been extremely effective, at showcasing the impact that bridging leadership can have?
Yeah. So I'll mention 2, ending with one in India. The first one I wanted to mention is in the Philippines, where one of the more extraordinary bridging leaders that I know became head of a foundation that focused on public health in the Philippines. And they selected, based on voluntary involvement, 11 governors of provinces and 144 municipal mayors and their health agents to go through a program in 11 different universities where the professors were trained to build their capacity as bridging leaders around preventive healthcare issues like child maternal mortality. In 2 years, in the municipalities and provinces where this took effect, the rate of maternal child mortality went down by 33%. I mean, this to me is extraordinary. I'm very proud to say that Murthy, who ran the initiative in India, in Maharashtra, was our first effort. Synergos played a role, but of course the main actors were UNICEF, Hindustan Unilever, 3 other large corporations, many NGOs, the state government of Maharashtra, and ourselves, to bring together initially 30 stakeholders to look at the systemic problems of malnutrition in the state, not just why aren't people getting enough to eat, but really analyze together across the differences. And I might say that there was very low trust across the sectors and levels. So actually Synergos had to hold the space for 2.5 years until these 30 stakeholders could build enough trust among themselves to create the Bhavisha Alliance, which Murthy ran, and which after 7 years of existence stopped functioning, but UNICEF did a study later, 2 years later, and it actually was proved to be the most effective reducer of stunting of any initiative they looked at all over the world, in which the rate of stunting in the state of Maharashtra came down from 39 to 23%. And as we look at it, please don't hold back your applause, and Murthy gets a lot of the credit. As we looked at it, we couldn't figure out, other than, of course, great people working in it, but the building of trust and the building of the capacity for bridging leaders among these 30, which then expanded to many more stakeholders, to bring people together and then implement the solution, was the major cause of the success.
Fantastic. Thank you for sharing that. That's tremendous. Coming to you, Mrs. Kumari, a lot of people probably know that you are famous for taking a hands-on approach to your philanthropic initiatives, even going so far as interviewing children yourself for some of our programs and so on. How has this sort of informed your approach to giving, and why do you think a hands-on approach is critical?
God has been so kind to us all this time, and we never thought in our wildest dreams that we will reach at this stage. It is only because of the education we reach at this stage. So we should not be the silent spectators. There are so many issues out there, and we need to make this world a better place for our next generation. So we thought only through education we can transform a person's life, and we can change the community. So that is the reason we choose education as our first priority for transforming the lives of different people. So we have been doing it for last 20 years, little by little, and so this is not just a program, actually it is an idea. So we thought it's one individual can make a lot of make a difference in one person's life, but many individuals can make a lot of difference in many more people's lives. So we have a lot of like-minded people joined us and sponsoring children, and we are collaborating with others, and there are a lot of people are giving, and so like I said, now 1,000 children are getting sponsored by the other people, and a lot of corporates are sponsoring us. So all this way we can, I think we can make a better world for this many people. But if lot of people can sponsor so many people, the education level will go up and their lifestyle also will go up.
Fantastic, thank you. Coming to you, Peggy, what are some lessons that are valuable for people perhaps just starting on this journey? What are some things that they should be aware of? What is some advice you can give them?
So maybe I could focus a little bit on what many people, including myself, when I got into this, experienced as obstacles to what I call being our best and most effective selves. And to me, the goal is to get to a place where I can serve with love in the most complete and effective way that I personally can do. So we began looking at okay, well, what are the obstacles? And so often it has to do with trauma in our lives, whether as children or later on, that make us scared, that make us in some ways shrink from daring to be our biggest and best selves. So we began to experiment. A lot of it was based on the experience of the Bavisha Alliance and other interventions that we involved in Africa and Latin America and in Bangladesh. And what we discovered was that when you build a group in which people come to trust each other and they allow themselves to be vulnerable enough to talk about their fears or their traumas or whatever, and then they get acknowledged for being authentic. So their self-confidence begins to grow. What they thought was either shameful or why they were so enraged with life or in so much grief because what had happened, become, one of the ways I used to say it is, my greatest wound is my greatest gift. In fact, if we can transform our pain and our vulnerability into the desire to give back and the desire to listen to others' pain until they too experience the desire to give back, that is the process that I've experienced that enables us to become and inspire other people to be good bridging leaders in whatever sphere they choose they want to get involved with, to begin to reweave the social tapestry, whether it's our neighborhood or our country or across divisions in the world.
Thank you. Mrs. Kumari, what are your thoughts on this? What advice do you have for people who are just starting out now? What are some ways that people in this room can give back, maybe not only in terms of monetary means, but some other ways?
Over the years, I figured out that philanthropy is not only for the rich people. We can do it in different ways. Actually, when I interview these children, sometimes they tell me that when I become a doctor or an engineer, I'll make a lot of money and I will sponsor somebody else's education like you are doing. I want to be like you. So I always tell them, you don't have to become so rich to do anything for others. You can help your friend who is not coping with the studies, so you can help your friend. Or you can read the newspaper to somebody who cannot read. Or you can walk an old person who cannot walk on the road. So these are all kind of philanthropy. So these are, so that is why that is what I give the advice to these children. And another thing is giving time. It is not that easy, but it is so rewarding. So when I interview these children, I tell them, so all these things, so they need to help others and things like that. And even I do lot of time because I interview the children in Kerala, all the students in Kerala whoever apply for this Vidyadhan scholarship. So I travel from south to north, in about 5 or 6 centers where I interview all the children. And the other states, wherever it is possible, I will go. If the date doesn't clash, I will go. So like Meera said, so there is no language barrier talking to these children. So we talk all kinds of languages, even the sign languages and all those things, we do that. But we can understand them even better. Because sometimes I feel that maybe because I came from that kind of a background, I understand them. Because when I interview them, I can visually really see that how their life is, how their home, how their surroundings, and all those things I can see in my mind. And sometimes it is not a pleasant feeling when we come out from this 1 week of trip in Kerala or the other days whenever I go there, because all these students have different stories to tell. Because there will be father has been drinking and beating up the mother and not taking care of the children. Most of the days they are not eaten anything, and I'm so happy that even with all these circumstances they are coming from, they are all very good in their studies and they wanted to do something in their life, and it is really amazing that how these children are doing. And another thing is, whenever there is after giving the scholarship also, we are all getting calls from these students, because sometimes their parents will be sick, sometimes some natural calamity happened and they lost their house, and sometimes they themselves will get into some accident and they don't know where to go. And lot of advisors, like Meera, Uma Shankar, Bhuvaneshwari, Vishwa, everybody, and me also get these kind of calls from these people, these children, because they don't have anybody to go and seek any advice. Sometimes we also help them, because they don't know. So even though we don't know them that well, only through interview we know them, but we help them, because these children are also like our own children, so we get so attached to them. Even though we see them only 1 or 2 times, we get so attached to them. Another thing is, our team also is very important, so we need to empower them to take decision on behalf of us. That is very important. So luckily we have a very good team, and they are all working in different sectors and in different states and different regions actually.
Great. Thank you.
Can I make a comment on
Please,
that?
yes.
One of the amazing things we spent the day, I'm going in depth with what the Shibilal family is doing, and they are bridging gaps in a number of different ways, but one of them is they've got, on the one hand, a very grassroots orientation and commitment. At the same time, they've got the knowledge, skills, and technology of Infosys behind them. So it's a remarkable way of both addressing needs at the most basic level, but using the most advanced technology, both in terms of how they do it, the holistic approach, but also how you then go to scale with some of these programs. So I really advocate, whatever careers you're in, whatever your orientation is, not trying to do it by yourself, but bringing together, as you said, the right team with the different kinds of skills that can reach not only the, what we might call the beneficiary population, but also those with professional access, with philanthropic, not only money, but talent and connections and influence to bring to bear on whatever the problem is that you're choosing to address.
Fantastic, thank you. And Peggy, a special question for you, given that you work in so many different countries around the world. How have you seen philanthropy evolve in the last couple of decades? What is the situation in your mind here in India, and how does that compare to some of the other places that you have programs in?
Well, when I started Synergos, we're an NGO, we're becoming a social enterprise, but in the beginning, we weren't so focused on the role of philanthropy. We were thinking more about community empowerment and also about partnership across sectors. But about 20 years ago, we began to realize that in a way, people who have access to the capital to put into these kinds of initiatives, philanthropists or impact investors, often aren't connected to the grassroots. And so we realized that if we're going to get results at the grassroots, we have to work with philanthropists or impact investors to support them both in getting to know what the situation is on the ground, but also to make connections there, to establish their own credibility, to develop their own listening ability, so that whatever tack they take, it will actually really meet the needs that are there. The situation that we found when we started working on this, I'll use Latin America as an example. There were many people involved in what we call charity, giving to an orphanage or helping create a school. I think this is probably somewhat similar to India. I would say there weren't at that time so many people really thinking strategically, using systems thinking, using a holistic approach. So I think one of the things I've seen evolve in the US, in Latin America, in India, is more and more people thinking in a systemic and strategic way about, okay, if I want to have the most impact, and this is going from helping an individual person, which I totally value and validate as an approach, but also those who want to have an impact at a societal or regional level. So I think that's novel. I think secondly, the use of technology in philanthropy, the use of data has been a big shift. And I think there's also a generational shift coming in how younger people are approaching how we solve problems for ourselves, but also on behalf of others who we'd like to collaborate with and support.
Absolutely. Thank you. Well, we could have, hours worth of discussions. I think there's so many more questions I would like to ask you. But I think I'll open it to the audience, because I'm sure a lot of you are itching to ask these two wonderful ladies some questions. So please do let us know if you have any questions for us. Yes.
Mrs. Peggy and Mrs. Kumari and the whole of the Shibulal family, I think you all are doing a great work, and this was inspiring. You started by telling that when you go home, I'm sure there's something worth inspiring you'll take home. Yes, we are going to take something inspiring that we are going to take home. I would like to ask you something. You see, when you're doing this good work and you're carrying on your journey, I'm sure you face some challenges. So can you let us know a few of the challenges that you face even now, and how do you manage them?
Who's going? Would you like to
For
start?
me?
Yes. Either of you, both of you, I guess. Peggy,
could start?
please, yeah.
So one challenge is when you get so involved with this is the risk of burnout. I'm sure there are people in this room who really spend their lives committed to trying to resolve these problems. I myself burnt out about 13 years into Synergos, and I had to take a break. And that was actually when I began reflecting on how do activists like ourselves regenerate ourselves and regain the energy that we started out with, that we get so tired. And part of the answer that I experience in that is by developing groups, teams, whether it's among friends or through an organization or a partnership, where you really do support each other, and not only support in the technical sense, but when you're really down, because you see the degree of suffering that there is out in the world, and it's very hard when you work in this sector not to be really impacted by that. How do you come back? How do you not just feel in anguish for the people that are suffering so many things? And there are many answers to that, but I'll just leave that as one of the challenges that I think I and my team at Synergos and all the groups that we partner with have to deal with on a day-to-day basis.
Actually, I'm going to answer that on behalf. I think one of the biggest challenges which we face is choice. Right? For example, we get 30,000 applications for 1,000 seats. So the Vidyadhan program is completely online. You get 30,000 applications for 1,000 seats. Every time she goes and comes back, I have 3 days to deal with. Because she will come back so, first of all, the limit is 1,000 children. So of course she wants to take 3,000. That's the first argument we will both have. Because you have to scale with certain criteria, right? You can't just blindly scale. So choice, I think, and it is exactly what Peggy said, because how do your empathy will drag you down. Really, really drag you down, right? And so it is not that bad here. In fact, another program which she runs is cardiac care for small children. That is actually enormously weighing on your mind, because you are dealing with small children. So originally, she used to be involved in choosing the beneficiary, right? And then one thing you find out is that finally the recovery of the child is not in anybody's hand but in God's. So even after you fund, you could end up losing the child. And you will be standing there and you will be wondering, if I had not funded, this child would have been still alive. It is really that bad. So it is very weighing on the mind to make these choices and sometimes to see the consequences.
Thank you. Thank you. Anybody else? Any other questions? Yes, please.
Ms. Dulani and Mrs. Shibulal, just a question that other than education, which is very important to move forward, I think the biggest issue that we have in India is finding sustainable jobs or having skill training that keeps you going. There are enough people in this country, even in the city, who are MBAs and probably are now taking on jobs which are not in caliber with what they're doing. So what happens to people at that level where, yes, you're doing a wonderful job of training them at the basics in education, but getting them prepared for the real world, and that's the biggest challenge. My mom heads an organization which is an NGO for the past 30 years. Biggest issue is what happens when you look at skill training or placing people. I think that pain has to be addressed, and while I have a plan and I hope it works, I'm wondering at the larger level, what do we do to get these young people ready in the real world? What does education do to keep them prepared? Because not every education system prepares you for the real world, unless you're going at IIT or taking up something which is going to be vocationally ready for you. Those, I think, are issues that need to be addressed. Just wondered what you ladies are planning for your respective organizations.
Fantastic. Thank you. I'll maybe ask Peggy to give you some thoughts on that, and then maybe Shruti, if I can ask you, or Mohit from her team, because they run a wonderful skilling institute called Satya. Maybe they could tell you a little bit about the work that they are doing to address this, and please chime in as and when relevant. Mohit, please.
Yeah, so one of the initiatives that we have started about a year back is exactly in the same space that you have mentioned. So we are trying to reach out to underprivileged youth all across India, and we are focused right now in the hospitality sector, travel and tourism. We are trying to see how we can train them and get them placed in the jobs. The main thing that I want to mention, and we can talk a lot more during the dinner, we're trying to build their career. The problem with the skilling sector, or the challenge with the skilling sector in India, is we're trying to get these youths, give them some basic training and get them a job. We strongly believe that is not the right model, because these guys need to sustain all their life, and a 3-month or a 5-month training cannot solve the problem. So the academy that we have set up, we are committing to support these youth for 5 years to help them build their career. At this point, we have, in last 1 year, we have about 65, 66 students that have gone through the training. And these are students from Kashmir, Manipur, UP, Bihar, Karnataka, obviously, south of India. And they are getting pretty good jobs. So there is a lot that we can do to bring these kids up. I will stop at this right now unless you have any specific question and we can connect.
Do you want to add anything?
Yeah, what I'd like to add in the very good presentation that he gave this morning, what I was most impressed with was it's not just technical skills, but young people who come from backgrounds where they may not have had the privilege of how you interact socially or speak in English or whatever the issue is, need support beyond whatever the specific skill training is. So they will continue with these young people over, was it 5 years, something like that, to support them, get mentors for them, etc. And another member of the Global Philanthropist Circle, who's from the US but working in the MENA region, Middle East, North Africa, is engaged in a similar program of identifying in each country what are the areas of job growth, and then finding young people who are interested in getting preparation for that. But it takes the holistic approach that I think the Shibulal family is using in all of their initiatives to really support the young people for success over time.
Sorry, one thing I just wanted to add about Satya is that it is actually in the piloting stage currently. And one of the things that we could use enormous help with is in getting students. So if any of you have students that may be interested in pursuing a career in hospitality and may not know that route in and are coming from underprivileged backgrounds, please do connect with us. This is actually, it is a free program, and the idea, as Mohit mentioned, is that we help them get a career. That means it is absolutely in line with our other programs, which encourage transformational change, livelihood change. And one of the statistics that we know currently from the 1 year of experience that we have is that the family income of these students, as soon as they enter the mainstream industry 6 months after their training, their family income doubles immediately. And that's a huge impact that we can see, and we'd like to scale that to many, many more students. So if any of you have, any of you that know any students or know NGOs that are working in this space trying to get students this type of skilling, then please connect with us.
So we take students between 18 to 25. If they are a few months short of 18, that is okay. We just want to make sure they are legally.
I think, Shruti, we run a school in Banaswadi, college in Banaswadi, which have all the students of this type. And this school, basically, the students pays the fees as less as about 100 rupees a month or say 500 rupees a month, and they are studying there. And we consistently work with them to see how we can get them employed and take it forward, and we find it difficult there. So I think we'll take your support and take it forward. Thank you for that.
Thank you so much. Is there another?
I have a question, actually. We know that the problems that we face as a country are, we're talking about 330 million children. We're talking about, of those 330 million, at least 240 million are below the poverty line. We know we are facing an issue where 1 billion children are going to be very soon passed through their teens and are going to need jobs and lives and livelihoods. So when you look at, for you as philanthropists, how do you deal with the scale of a problem that feels so enormous for this country, right? And we know that, there are so many amazing small, I call them the fireflies, right? We do these small initiatives for, 10,000 kids, 20,000 kids, but we need solutions for 200 million of them. And those solutions probably lie in systemic change, right? In government change, in offering education of quality that can allow lives to change. And so I'm constantly thinking about how can we as philanthropists, large philanthropists, small philanthropists, actually put our effort to change some of those levers.
Sure.
So what are your thoughts on that?
Thank you. So Khushbu is part of our team at Shiksha Lokam, which is an education leadership platform. So she's probably the best person to start the response to that question, and I'll ask you to chime in where relevant and appropriate, please. Khushbu.
Maybe I'll. That's a very interesting question, and that's one challenge that constantly haunts us every day when we are engaging in our work in the Shiksha Lokam team. And I'm sure somewhere in the audience, our mentors, Mr. Sanjay Purohit is sitting. And he uses a very interesting phrase. He says, over time we have always tried to scale what has worked. But what has worked in a small geography is not necessarily, it will always work at scale. So scale what works should be the mantra. And for that, it's required that we think out of the box. We think of these working with the system, start engaging with systems that are already mainstream and engage with them. We can't just create a parallel system because that's just not that's not worth pursuing, right? So that's our attempt at Shiksha Lokam. Over dinner, we'll definitely engage with you and, okay. So Shiksha Lokam is an education leadership platform. Again, like you said, how it's important to engage with the government, with the Department of Education. And what we do at Shiksha Lokam, we have created a technology in open digital infrastructure on top of which anybody can host, co-create solutions that can work in their context. So whether it's about learning solutions, I am a school principal, I want to learn about library, or I want to learn about maybe how to engage parents, you can search for resources that you want to learn at your convenience. Similarly, you want to just assess something, you want to improve and design your own micro improvement projects out of your mind. So the platform offers you that flexibility to do things. So these are these micro improvements that we talk, and that's how we are aiming that the platform will catalyze these micro improvements for every principal.
Thanks so much, Khushbu. Peggy, is there anything you would like to add about the scale problem? I'm sure that's a problem you grapple with quite a bit
All the
in your
time.
work, yeah.
Yeah. So I wanted to speak by example of what could happen and what too often doesn't. So shortly after the Bhavisha Alliance dissolved, and obviously the whole problem was not resolved, and there were many issues to it. One of them which was that all of the food for the feeding program in Maharashtra came from one supplier. And the content of it was not nutritious. It was not very tasty, but it was cheap. So here's something that we weren't able to address during that time. Who is this producer? How did he capture the entire market with something that is not addressing the malnutrition problem? So I was talking one day with a prominent businessman from Mumbai who was looking for a big challenge. And unfortunately, because I'm not here very often and Bhavisha had dissolved, so we didn't have others to follow up, I said, look, you have the capacity to figure out among your business connections, among your political connections, who is this guy and what is it that's causing that he gets to do that and that it's not working? And he got very excited about it. There are many people, probably many people in this room, and I'm not just talking about this issue, who are in positions of influence sufficient so that if they were to reach out to other people who were influential, they could not only track down what is the cause, and obviously corruption is behind it, but they could have the political connections to go to whoever it would take to confront that person or those people who are allowing this kind of corruption to happen. And by developing partnerships, groups that trust each other, to develop the kind of pressure that would allow this kind of phenomenon to change. So it's not something one person can do alone, but we're going to need for each of these problems someone who's going to step up and take the leadership. This is the advantage that philanthropists have. They not only have money, they have influence, they have power, they have connections. We need to have that kind of initiative and then have that connect to whether it's the NGOs or the universities or other businesses or local government people who are actually not corrupt and who are committed to change, to make these kind of transformations that will really address some of the underlying big problems.
Fantastic. Thank you, Peggy. Unfortunately, it looks like we're out of time. Very sorry about this. But I think you've already met some of the members of our team. And I just want to say, Kate, if you could just show your hand. She's from Peggy's team at Synergos. So if any of you want to connect with them over dinner, please feel free. And we look forward to continuing this discussion this evening and beyond. Thank you very much for listening. Thank you for being here. Thank you so much. And thank you both.